Before we begin, if you're fascinated by the real stories of power, strategy, and the untold history of the underworld, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We dive deep into the moments that changed everything. Now, let's get into it. What do you say when the barrels of the most powerful criminal organization in America are pointed at your chest? Do you beg? Do you bluff? Or do you reveal a truth so devastating that it turns the weapons into worthless metal? This is the story of a single sentence. Not a shouted threat, not a desperate plea, but a calm, collected statement delivered by Harlem's king, Bumpy Johnson, to the armed emissaries of mafia boss Tomy Lucchese. That sentence didn't just save his life. It redefined the balance of power in New York City. It wasn't a threat. It was something far more terrifying. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into the psychology of power, consider subscribing for more stories where the mind is the ultimate weapon. Now, to understand the weight of that moment, you need the context. By the mid-20th century, Tomy Three-Finger Brown Lucchese was a cornerstone of the Commission, the governing board of the American Mafia. His power was quiet, diplomatic, and woven into the fabric of unions, politics, and the city's infrastructure. He was a strategist who operated from the shadows. Across town, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson ruled Harlem with a different kind of authority. His power was personal, rooted in fierce loyalty, street intelligence, and a reputation as the neighborhood's ruthless protector. He wasn't just a gangster. He was an institution. For years, a tense, unspoken border existed between the Italian syndicate's citywide operations and Bumpy's sovereign territory, Harlem. But Lucchese, ever the expansionist, decided to test that border. He didn't send a declaration of war. He sent an invitation to a meeting, an invitation backed by the implicit threat of his soldiers' presence. The conflict unfolded not in a bloody shootout, but in a tense, closed room. Lucchese's men, polished, professional, and armed, laid out their proposition. A partnership, a merger of interests, a tribute to be paid. It was a corporate takeover dressed in a silk suit. They had the guns, the backing of the national syndicate, and the confidence of inevitability. Bumpy listened, his expression unreadable. He let the ultimatum hang in the air, and then he began to speak. But he didn't argue. He didn't refuse. He didn't even address the offer on the table. Instead, he began a quiet recitation. He described in meticulous, unsettling detail the personal life of Tomy Lucchese. He mentioned the name of his mistress, the route he walked his dog on Sunday mornings, the specific booth in his favorite Italian restaurant where he always sat. He listed financial transactions, dates of meetings, and vulnerabilities no outsider should have known. The sentence that disarmed him wasn't, "I'll kill you." It was a precursor. It was something like, "You tell Tomy I know about the deposit he made to the offshore account in Geneva on 12th, and that his son's new teacher lives in an apartment my cousin owns." The true, terrifying sentence was the demonstration of omniscience that followed. The message was clear. You are here to threaten me with force, but I am threatening you with knowledge. You can pull that trigger, and my death will be reported before my body hits the floor by a network of eyes you cannot see. And then, every single detail I just shared becomes a weapon in the hands of my people. Your boss will not die in a war. He will be unraveled in his sleep. He then thanked them for their time, turned his back, and walked slowly out of the room, offering the ultimate act of defiance, his unprotected back, knowing they no longer held any real power. It was a psychological checkmate. And right here, in the middle of this incredible standoff, is where we have to pause and ask, do you want more breakdowns of history's most brilliant power plays? If so, hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring you more content just like this. Back to the story. The consequences were immediate and profound. The soldiers returned to Lucchese not with a new business partner, but with a verbatim report of Bumpy's knowledge. Witnesses described a normally unflappable Don Paling, his hand trembling as he grasped the implication. This wasn't fear of a bullet. It was the dread of a master planner who realizes his opponent's intelligence apparatus is inside his own house. All plans for Harlem were scrapped permanently. A new, deeper layer of respect and non-interference was cemented. Bumpy's legend reached mythic proportions overnight. He had defeated the mafia not with a bigger army, but with a better network. For Lucchese, it was a permanent lesson in the limits of traditional syndicate power against a deeply rooted, intelligent local force. For Harlem, it was a final proof that Bumpy was their irreplaceable shield. The legacy of that single, terrifying sentence is a masterclass in asymmetric power. Lucchese represented hierarchical, top-down force, the power of the system. Bumpy represented networked, bottom-up intelligence, the power of the ecosystem. The system is strong but blind. The ecosystem is fragile but all-seeing. Bumpy proved that in the modern world, true authority isn't derived from who you can order, but from what you know. He turned his deep connection to a community, his supposed limitation, into an unassailable strategic asset. The lesson is timeless. The most formidable defense is not a thicker wall, but 1,000 silent observers. The most powerful sentence is not a threat of violence, but a demonstration of understanding so complete it renders violence pointless. Bumpy Johnson didn't win with a gun. He won by revealing he had already read his enemy's playbook page by page. And that is a terror no amount of firepower can ever match. If you found this exploration of psychological warfare and underworld history compelling, we have deep dives on figures like Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, and Frank Costello waiting for you. The story of power has many chapters. Help us tell them all. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments which underworld strategist you want us to break down next. Thanks for watching. That demonstration of understanding was, in fact, a meticulously staged performance of omniscience, a grand illusion built on a foundation of gritty, street-level intelligence. Bumpy's sentence worked not because he knew everything, but because he knew the specific things that mattered most to men like Lucchese. The illusion of privacy, the sanctity of their hidden routines, the safety of their non-criminal identities. He didn't need a dossier on every mob soldier. He needed a pinpoint spotlight on the boss's deepest vulnerabilities. This transformed the confrontation from a negotiation of territory into a horrifying invasion of the self. For Lucchese, a man whose power was built on controlling environments, the realization that his most intimate spaces were already mapped and monitored was a form of psychological annihilation. The sentence was a key that unlocked a door Lucchese didn't even know was ajar, revealing a hallway of infinite potential exposures. The consequences deepened like a stain. Within the Lucchese family, the event created a silent fracture. The soldiers who had been present were no longer seen as mere enforcers. They were living carriers of a humiliating secret, a walking reminder of their boss's vulnerability. Their credibility was subtly diminished, their judgment questioned for having walked into such a transparent trap. For Bumpy, the victory demanded perpetual vigilance. He had raised the stakes to their highest possible level. Any future sign of weakness, any crack in his network's fidelity, would not just be a setback. It would be an invitation for total annihilation from a now deeply humiliated and cautious enemy. He was forced to institutionalize his moment of brilliance, turning that spontaneous intelligence coup into a permanent, standing department of his operation, a surveillance and counterintelligence wing dedicated solely to maintaining that edge of terrifying knowledge. The legacy of that sentence is the blueprint for modern information warfare in the criminal and corporate worlds alike. It proves that data is not just power, it is a preemptive strike. Bumpy's maneuver anticipated the era of big data, social engineering, and cyber espionage by decades. He showed that the real battlefield is not geography, but perception and personal security. Today, a hacker doesn't need to threaten the CEO. They need only demonstrate they have accessed their private emails. A rival corporation doesn't need to outsell another. It can cripple it by leaking its strategic plans. The core principle is identical. The most devastating attack is the one that proves your opponent's core defenses are already compromised. Bumpy Johnson's whispered sentence to those gunmen echoes in every data breach, every blackmail scheme, every geopolitical leak. It cemented the idea that in a conflict, the ultimate victory lies not in destroying your enemy's army, but in haunting their mind, in making them see your eyes in every shadow of their own sanctuary. He won the room not by being the strongest man in it, but by being the only one who truly understood it. And in doing so, he wrote the first rule of 21st century power. Sovereignty is no longer defined by who controls the land, but by who controls the narrative of what is known and what is fearfully, terrifyingly possible. Controlling that narrative required Bumpy to become a mythmaker in real time, an architect of a living legend that was both shield and weapon. The sentence was not an end, but a genesis, the foundational myth for a new kind of sovereignty. In the days and weeks that followed, the story didn't just spread. It mutated, growing in the telling. In the barbershops of Harlem, it was said Bumpy had psychic powers. In the social clubs of Little Italy, it was whispered he had a mole in the commission itself. Bumpy did not correct these exaggerations. He curated them. He understood that the perception of his omnipotence was now a strategic asset more valuable than any single piece of intelligence. He began to feed the myth with calculated, subtle performances, a knowing glance at a rival across a crowded room, a seemingly offhand remark that later proved prophetically accurate. He weaponized ambiguity, allowing fear and imagination to do the work of an army. This post-confrontation period saw Bumpy's power evolve from grounded, street-level control into something more abstract and potent, a form of deterrence theory. He no longer needed to win every small skirmish. He merely needed to remind everyone that he could know about it. Petty thieves and rival operators in Harlem began to police themselves, not out of love for Bumpy, but out of the paralyzing fear that their disloyalty was a test and that he was already watching. The sentence had created a panopticon of the mind, where his subjects internalized his gaze. For Tomy Lucchese, the long-term consequence was a strategic paralysis within his own domain. He became risk-averse in any matter touching Harlem, his decision-making clouded by the haunting question, what does he know this time? This hesitation created opportunities for other rivals within the five families, who sensed a new caution in the once bold Lucchese. A single psychological wound had inflicted a chronic strategic limp. Bumpy, in turn, faced the existential burden of maintaining the illusion. The network that provided the intelligence became his most sacred and vulnerable organ. He had to ensure its loyalty not just with money or fear, but with an almost paternalistic care, because his betrayal would mean more than a loss of information. It would mean the implosion of the myth that now sustained his entire empire. He became a prisoner of his own perfection, forced to live up to the godlike reputation he had conjured in that single, brilliant moment. The ultimate legacy of that sentence, therefore, is a treatise on the nature of power in the information age. It marks the moment when raw criminal force was first conclusively subordinate to network knowledge. Bumpy Johnson proved that authority flows not from the barrel of a gun, but from the control of context. He demonstrated that to truly command, one must master not just a game, but the metagame, the layer of perception, psychology, and information that exists above the physical board. His sentence was the ultimate soft power move in a world of hard power, revealing that the most durable kingdoms are built not on land, but in the minds of both subjects and adversaries. In the end, the man who spoke the sentence became the sentence, a living, breathing statement of principle that echoed through the decades, that to be truly powerful, you must first become inescapably known, while remaining utterly unknowable. He didn't just change the rules of the street. He revealed that the street itself was just a metaphor for a far more complex and terrifying game of shadows and whispers.